Get on the ground now." The words exploded through our quiet suburban street, shattering the evening calm like a thunderclap. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted to the living room window, yanking the blinds aside. Outside in our driveway, two men in black tactical vests, fake badges glinting under the streetlights, were pointing a loaded handgun at my wife. Sarah, she stood frozen, grocery bags still dangling from her hands, her face unreadable. These weren't real cops, they were HOA enforcers. Puffed up wannabe vigilantes hired by our tyrannical neighborhood association. But what these idiots didn't know? Sarah wasn't just my kind, cookie-baking wife. She was an undercover FBI agent, and they'd just stepped into a world of trouble they couldn't imagine. We lived in Willow Creek, picture-perfect subdivision with manicured lawns and pastel houses that screamed American dream. But beneath the surface, it was a pressure cooker, ruled by the iron fist of the Homeowners Association. The HOA, led by the infamous Karen McAllister, was obsessed with control. They'd fine you for a garden gnome they deemed tacky, send passive-aggressive letters about your trash cans being visible for an extra hour, or even measure your grass to ensure it was exactly 2.5 inches tall. Sarah and I moved here 2 years ago, hoping for a quiet life while she worked her high-stakes FBI cases in secret. We kept our heads down, paid our dues, and smiled through gritted teeth at HOA meetings. But tonight, the HOA's reign of terror had gone too far. It started innocently enough. Sarah had been at the grocery store, picking up ingredients for her famous lasagna. She pulled into our driveway just after 7 p.m., the sky bruised with twilight. I was inside, scrolling through my phone, half watching a football game, when I heard the screech of tires and a man's voice barking orders. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's TV, but the shouting grew louder, more aggressive. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle," one of them yelled. My stomach dropped. I crept to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds, saw the scene unfolding like something out of a bad action movie. The two men stood like they owned the place. The leader, a burly guy with a buzzcat and a too-tight vest, gripped his gun with both hands, his face twisted in a snarl. His partner, a wiry dude with a cheap badge pinned crookedly to his chest, held a flashlight trained on Sarah's face, blinding her. "You ignored our signal to stop," Buzzcott bellowed. "Taillights out, and that's a violation." Sarah's car did have a flickering taillight, barely noticeable, something we planned to fix tomorrow. But to these HOA goons, it was an excuse to play Dirty Harry. They wore uniforms that screamed rent-a-cop, with Willow Creek security patched on their sleeves, but the way they waved that gun around, they thought they were above the law. Sarah stood calm, almost eerily so, her grocery bags crinkling in the tense silence. Milk, eggs, and a loaf of bread peeked out of the top, such normal things in such an insane moment. She set the bags down. Slowly, her movements deliberate, like she was defusing a bomb. "I'm complying," she said, her voice steady, hands rising to shoulder height. I wanted to scream, to run out and tackle these clowns, but something in Sarah's posture stopped me. Her eyes flicked between the men, not with fear, but with calculation. I'd seen that look before when she'd come home from a late night. Paralegal job, her cover story with a glint of adrenaline in her gaze. These fake cops had no idea who they were messing with. I could feel the air crackling with the storm about to break. Neighbors started poking their heads out, curtains twitching across the street. Old Mr. Henderson stood on his porch, clutching his cane, while the Johnsons' teenage son filmed the scene on his phone. The HOA had been flexing its muscles for months, but this was a new low, pulling guns over a taillight. My blood boiled. But I stayed glued to the window, knowing Sarah had a plan. Always did. Still, my hand shook as I gripped the blinds, praying this wouldn't end in tragedy. To understand why this confrontation exploded, you need to know the nightmare that was the Willow Creek HOA when Sarah and I moved here 2 years ago. The neighborhood seemed like a suburban paradise. Neat lawns, kids on scooters and block parties with lemonade stands. We thought it'd be the perfect place to blend in while Sarah worked her classified FBI case. But beneath the picket fences lurked a dictatorship run by Karen McAllister, retired realtor with a perm, a clipboard, and an ego the size of a small planet. Karen didn't just lead the HOA, she was the HOA, ruling with an iron fist and a Smile that could curdle milk. Karen's reign started small. A $50 fine for a mailbox painted the wrong shade of beige. A warning letter for leaving a trash can out past 8 a.m. at $200. It's a penalty for a kid's chalk drawing on the sidewalk because it violated aesthetic standards. But over time, her power trips grew bolder. She installed cameras on every street corner, claiming it was for safety, though we all knew she was spying. Drones buzzed over backyards, catching people grilling without an approved permit or planting unlisted flowers. One neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, got a $300 fine because her rose bushes were too red. Another resident, a single dad named Mike, was threatened with eviction for letting his dog bark twice after 9 p.m. The HOA's rulebook was thicker than a phone book, and Karen enforced it like a warden. Residents lived in fear. At monthly HOA meetings, held in the community center under Karen's watchful glare, people whispered complaints but never spoke up. "Should make your life hell," one neighbor told me, eyes darting nervously. Karen had a knack for digging. Up dirt late property taxes, a missed fine, anything to shame you into submission. She'd roll through the neighborhood in her golf cart. Her husband Gary, trailing behind like a loyal lapdog, jotting down infractions on her clipboard. Once, she'll fine me $75 because our grass was 0.3 inches too long, buried. In her undercover work, laughed it off. "Pick your battles," she'd say, her FBI training keeping her cool. But I could tell even she was fed up. Then came the final straw, Willow Creek Security. 6 months ago, Karen announced the HOA was hiring a private security force to maintain order. Enter a ragtag crew of ex-small cops, gym brothers, and wannabe tough guys who looked like they'd watched too many action movies. They wore black vests with Willow Creek security patches, pinned fake badges to their chests, and carried guns they had no business wielding. These clowns patrolled in an unmarked SUV, pulling people over for nonsense like parking 2 inches over a line or having a basketball hoop in the driveway. They'd issue tickets with no legal weight, but the intimidation worked. One neighbor, a quiet accountant named Priya, was reduced to tears when they cited her for a cracked flower pot. Another, a retired veteran, nearly got into a fistfight when they accused him of loitering on his own porch. The security team answered only to Karen, treated them like her personal militia. Rumors swirled that the company was a shady outfit, unlicensed and barely vetted, but Karen didn't care. She loved the power. At the last HOA meeting, she bragged about how the security team had reduced violations by 47%. As if our neighborhood was a crime den instead of a sleepy suburb. Sarah and I kept our heads down. Her FBI case was too critical to risk exposure over HOA drama. But I'd catch her watching the patrols, her jaw tight, like she was sizing up an enemy. "They're playing cop," she muttered once. "Dangerous. Game." The night of the confrontation, I realized how dangerous. The fake cops had been tailing Sarah's car, likely tipped off by one of Karen's drone sweeps, spotting her taillight. To them, it was another chance to flex. To us, it was the spark that lit the fuse. As I watched from the window, heart pounding, I knew this wasn't just about a taillight. It was about a neighborhood held hostage by a petty tyrant and her armed goons and Sarah. She was about to show them what real authority looked like. As the fake cop screamed at Sarah to kneel, I saw her shift, subtle but unmistakable. Her shoulders squared, her eyes narrowed, and her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd faced far worse than these wannabe tough guys. To the neighbors, Sarah was just a quiet, 30-something paralegal who jogged in leggings, baked cookies for block parties, and always had a warm smile. She'd wave at kids, chat about the weather, and blend into Willow Creek like she was born to be. A suburban mom, but I knew the truth. Sarah was Special Agent Sarah Carter, a seasoned FBI operative working undercover to dismantle a dangerous trafficking ring operating just 20 miles away. Okay, and these HOA clowns had just picked the wrong woman to bully, Sarah's? Double life was a secret she guarded fiercely. To the world, her paralegal job explained her late nights and occasional trips out of town. But in reality, those nights were spent staking out warehouses, infiltrating criminal networks, or meeting informants in seedy diners. She'd been with the FBI for 8 years, trained in everything from hand-to-hand combat to high-stakes surveillance. Her calm demeanor, the one that made neighbors think she was just sweet Sarah, was forged in moments like this, facing down armed threats with a cool head and a plan. I'd seen glimpses of her world, the way she'd check her phone with, a furrowed brow, the concealed holster she'd slip on before work, the quiet intensity in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Once after a late night op, she came home with a faint bruise on her cheek and a story about tripping at the office. I didn't ask questions. She'd tell me what I needed to know. Living with an undercover agent wasn't easy, Sarah. Couldn't share details of her cases, not even with me. It's safer this way, she'd say, squeezing my hand. But I knew enough. Her current case was big, dangerous, and close to a breakthrough. She'd been working it for months, posing as a low-level courier to gain the trust of a trafficking ring's middlemen. Her cover was airtight, her alias backed by fake IDs, and a paper trail the FBI had meticulously crafted. Willow Creek was the perfect place to lay low-boring, predictable, the kind of place nobody would suspect an FBI agent lived, or so we thought until the HOA turned it into a surveillance state. As Buzzcat barked, hands behind your head, and his wiry partner waved his flashlight like a spotlight. Sarah knelt slowly, her movements deliberate, but her eyes never left them. I could see her calculating their stance, their weapons, the distance between them. She was reading them like a book, picking up every nervous twitch, every overconfident smirk. "You think you're special, lady?" Buzzcott sneered, his gun steady, but his voice cracking with bravado. His partner chipped in. "We run this neighborhood." Sarah's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile. I knew that Lookit was the same one she'd had when she disarmed a drunk at a bar years ago. Before I even knew she was FBI, she was in her element. And these goons were out of their depth. What they couldn't see was the earpiece hidden under her hair, a tiny device she wore on high-alert days like today. She'd been at a covert meeting that afternoon, and her FBI team was likely already tracking her location. The moment these idiots pulled their guns, she'd tapped the earpiece, sending a silent distress signal. Backup was coming, and fast. But Sarah didn't need rescuing. She was orchestrating this takedown. She knelt, her hands behind her head. I could almost hear her mind working. De-escalate, assess, control. She wasn't just complying. She was buying time, letting these fools dig their own graves. From the window, my heart raced, but I trusted her. I'd seen her handle worse, like the time she came home with a split lip and a story she couldn't tell. These HOA goons with their fake badges and inflated egos were nothing compared to the criminals she faced daily. Still, the gun in Buzzcott's hand made my stomach churn. If they panicked, if they made one wrong move, this could end badly. Neighbors watched from their porches, phones recording as the tension thickened. Sarah's eyes flicked toward me for a split second, a silent message. "Stay put. I've got this." And I knew she did. In one fluid motion, Sarah rose to her feet, her hands no longer raised in surrender. The air seemed to freeze as she reached into her jacket, pulling out a sleek, silver FBI badge that caught the streetlight's glow like a beacon. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Drop your weapons now." Her words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that made your knees buckle. Buzzcot's face drained of color, his gun trembling in his meaty hands. His eyes darted to his partner, searching for a lifeline. But the wiry goon was just as stunned, his flashlight now shaking so badly it cast wild beams across the driveway. "Yeah, you're lying," Buzzcot stammered, his bravado crumbling. Sarah's gaze didn't waver, her voice turning to ice. "Test me. My team's already here." She wasn't bluffing. The faint wail of sirens, barely audible at first, grew louder, slicing through the suburban quiet. Sarah had tapped her hidden earpiece. The moment these clowns pulled their guns, sending a distress signal to her FBI unit, her team, stationed nearby due to her high-stakes case, was already en route, coordinated with local police for backup. But even without them, Sarah owned the scene. She stood tall, her 5 feet 6 inches frame somehow towering over the two goons, her badge held steady like a judge's gavel. The grocery bags at her feet, milk, bread, jar of marinara, sat as a surreal reminder of how this had started over a taillight. Buzzkot's gun wavered, his knuckles white. This is a misunderstanding, he sputtered, taking a step back. His partner, now sweating bullets, muttered, "We're just security, ma'am." We didn't mean. Sarah cut him off, her tone sharp but controlled.
Oh, you're not
Security? You're impersonating law enforcement, brandishing firearms without authority. Lower your weapons, or you'll be in cuffs before you can blink. Her words hit like a slap, and the wiry goon's gun clattered to the pavement first, his hands shooting up in surrender. Buzzcott hesitated, his ego wrestling with reality, but the growing roar of sirens made the choice for him. His gun dropped, with a dull thud, and he raised his hands, muttering curses under his breath. Within moments, the street erupted into organized chaos. The kind Sarah orchestrated like a conductor. 2 black FBI's UVs screeched into Willow Creek, followed by 3 police cruisers, their red and blue lights painting the houses in frantic strobes. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands, hands up, on the ground. Cops complied, dropping to their knees, faces pressed to the asphalt, as real law enforcement swarmed them. Sarah stepped forward, badge still in hand, and briefed the lead officer in a low, authoritative tone. To suspects armed, impersonating law enforcement, "I've got it under control." The officer nodded, clearly recognizing her rank as his team cuffed the goons. Neighbors gawked from their lawns, phones recording, jaws dropped. Old Mr. Henderson leaned on his cane, muttering, "Well, I'll be damned." The Johnsons' teenage son, still filming, whispered, "This is going viral." Across the street, Karen McAllister stood frozen on her perfectly manicured lawn, her golf cart parked behind her like a throne. Her face was a mask of horror, her clipboard dangling uselessly in her hand. She'd built her little empire on fear, but now it was collapsing in real time. And Sarah was the wrecking ball. I stepped outside, my legs shaky, awestruck by my wife. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes softening for a split second. A silent "I'm okay" before she turned back to the scene. She directed the officers to secure the fake cops' weapons and check their IDs, her voice calm but commanding. One of the FBI agents, a tall woman in a tactical vest, approached Sarah with a nod. "Good work, Carter. We've got it from here." Sarah handed over the scene but stayed vigilant, scanning the crowd for any threats. Her training never switched off as the fake cops were shoved into a cruiser. Buzzcott shot Sarah a glare, but it was pathetic, like a kid caught stealing cookies. The wiry goon just stared at the ground, his bravado gone. The police confiscated their fake badges and guns, while the FBI team collected statements from neighbors. Sarah's groceries still sat in the driveway, a bizarre anchor to normalcy. I picked them up, clutching the bags like a lifeline as the reality hit. My wife had just dismantled the Osgoon squad without breaking a sweat. The fallout from that night was nothing short of spectacular, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. By morning, Willow Creek was buzzing not with Karen's drones, but with gossip, news vans, and a sense of liberation. The 2 fake cops, Buzzcott and his wiry sidekick, were slapped with serious charges: impersonating law enforcement, unlawful use of firearms, and reckless endangerment. Their real names, Gary Thompson and Eddie Ruiz, sounded far less intimidating than their tough guy act. Turns out, they were barely trained security guards with no legal authority to carry guns, let alone point them at anyone. Their employer, Willow Creek Security, was exposed as a fly-by-night operation, unlicensed and riddled with complaints. The company folded within days, its shady owner vanishing as lawsuits piled up. Karen McAllister, the HOA's self-crowned queen, was at the center of the storm. The neighborhood learned she'd handpicked the security firm to flex her power, ignoring red flags about their credentials. Her golf cart patrols, once a symbol of fear, now looked pathetic. At an emergency HOA meeting, residents unleashed years of pent-up rage, you hired armed thugs, shouted Mr. Patel, who'd been fined $400 for an unapproved fence. Priya, the accountant, once bullied over a flower pot, presented a petition with 200 signatures demanding Karen's resignation. Karen, her face ashen, tried to deflect, blaming budget constraints and resident non-compliance. But the crowd wasn't buying it. By the end of that week, Karen resigned in disgrace, her husband Gary trailing behind her like a scolded puppy. Their house went up for sale shortly after, the for sale sign, a victory flag for the neighborhood. Rumors swirled that they'd moved to a condo in Florida, far from Willow Creek's wrath. The HOA itself didn't survive the scandal. Multiple residents, emboldened by Sarah's takedown, filed lawsuits against the association for harassment, illegal surveillance, and endangering the community. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen, its cameras dismantled, and its drones grounded. A new board was elected normal. People like Mrs. Lopez, the Rosebush lady, and Mike, the single dad with the barking dog. They rewrote the rulebook, slashing it to a single page of common sense guidelines. No more fines for chalk drawings or to red flowers. The neighborhood breathed easier. Kids played freely. Barbecues returned without fear of a drone buzzing overhead. Sarah's cover miraculously held. Her FBI team swooped in with a cover story, spinning the incident as a routine training exercise to deflect attention. The local news bought it, and neighbors, too awestruck to dig deeper, just whispered about that badass paralegal. Sarah went back to her undercover work, chasing traffickers with the same quiet intensity. One night over coffee, she laughed about the incident. "Those guys thought they were Rambo," she said, shaking her head. "They're lucky I didn't disarm them myself." I just nodded, still amazed by her. Her groceries from that night: milk, bread marinara made it into the fridge, and we had lasagna a few days later. A normal moment after the chaos. Willow Creek's different now. The streets feel alive again, with kids' laughter and neighbors chatting without looking over their shoulders. The Johnson's son posted his video of the takedown online. It's racking up millions of views and comments like HOA got what they deserved. Old Mr. Henderson even started a neighborhood watch. Real volunteers, not armed goons. As for me, I'm just glad I married a woman who can handle a gun better than I handle a lawnmower. Sarah's still out there, saving the world one case at a time while I mow the lawn exactly 2.5 inches just to be safe. The lesson? Never underestimate someone who seems ordinary. They might be way tougher than you think. And maybe, just maybe, don't let your HOA turn into a mini police state. Power corrupts, but courage, like Sarah's, can tear it down.